All right, everybody, we are back trying to get this figured out. Hopefully, we will have this done in just a second. Hang tight, hang tight. We are working through just a few technical difficulties. Thank you for hopping on. Hang tight, hang tight. Sorry about the delay, but we are hopefully going to get started in just a minute. Appreciate you being here. Waiting for another person to join me so we can get started. Hello, everybody.
Woo!
All right, there we go.
Oh my goodness. Let me share on my page. He's still going on. Oh my gosh. This is amazing. All right. I will say share now. Okay. I just shared that. So we still know how to find us. I don't know if YouTube is on, but I have to upload this, I'm sure, onto YouTube. But
And your volume is really, really low.
Oh. So one moment. How about now? Oh, is this better?
Yes. And then make sure I got mine all the way up. I don't know if I can make this like an external speaker. So that I can hear you.
Yes, because we have to be able to hear one another.
I can hear you. That's perfect. That's so much better. I can hear you now.
You can hear me now? Okay.
Yes.
I'm just going to check my page to see if it's coming up on my page. Okay, people are coming on. Yay. Woo! Devil won't hold us down, y'all. He won't hold us down. Woohoo! Thank you, Jesus. All right, y'all. Let me get it together. Y'all have no idea. It's been a journey, y'all. It's been a whole journey. It's been a whole journey. But we making it a whole behind, but nevertheless.
Yes. That's all right. We are here.
That's all right. We are here. We are here. All right. So welcome everyone. We are so apologetic for the delay. When I tell y'all the devil's mad, that tells you right there, Coach Holly. It's gonna be fire. When I tell you it's gonna be fire, because the devil's mad. The devil's mad, he gonna stay mad. Okay, y'all? Because we're gonna get this content out in the name of Jesus. Yeah. All right, here we go. So y'all, I know many may not know who Coach Holly is. First, I'm gonna say hello to everyone. I'm Nakia Speaks, your host for tonight. I also have a special guest joining us, Coach Holly Brock. She is a licensed clinical therapist who has given us the honor of her knowledge and expertise. And she's prophetic, y'all. Come on now. When you got the degrees behind your name, prophetic, you love the Lord. Come on. It gets no better than that. It gets no better than that. Jesus. Yes. All right. So I want to just kind of give you all some kind of background as to what this topic altogether and all that good stuff. So, Coach Holly and I were at a leadership retreat, and we knew of one another prior to the retreat, but in the midst of the retreat, we got to know one another for real, for real. Yes, during this retreat, it was a leadership retreat. It was spiritual. We tucked away, we shut ourselves in, and allowed God to be God. And it was a wonderful shift that took place, and the Lord just had his way. And Coach Holly, we pulled and tugged and we pulled and tugged until her mentor had to say, all right, 6 is call time. That's enough. You pulled her enough. And so after that, it birthed this conversation and this discussion. I said, Coach Holly, I have to have you on the show. You have to be able to share with our viewers. I believe it will bless so many people. And so through our discussion, the topic came about through Coach Holly, even called the Wounded Warrior. So we know that all of this information, all this content won't all be able to be shared in this one episode, but we do know it's going to birth further discussion. But for right now, we do want to at least lay a firm foundation, right, Coach Holly, for the viewers to be able to springboard off of. So that is our hope on tonight. So when Coach Holly first mentioned the topic, the Wounded Warrior, initially what came to mind was, and I know y'all like, that's what came to mind when you, it was, y'all, the word trauma just leaped in my spirit when she said the Wounded Warrior. So I looked it up. So trauma is defined as a deeply distressing or disturbing experience, right? When I looked it up, that's what it said. And so while we were on the retreat, Coach Holly said that trauma actually restructures the brain. And we were like, we kind of leaned in because I know I didn't know that majority of the room, and I have a whole master's degree, y'all, in social work, but with social work, you study more of how the family affects, from the previous to the current. It's not so much that we studied in school, at least not in my master's program, where we studied like the brain, and more so was how it affected the family environment and like holistic type, setting. So when Coach Holly and I get to talking, it's almost like we're like, no, we're not doing a webinar now. We're just going to do it live. So with that's right there, Coach Holly, about how trauma restructures the brain.
Okay. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah.
And so just like she said, we had such a good conversation during our leadership training, and we ended up on the topic of trauma. And so even before we experience trauma on this side of our mother's womb, there's oftentimes in some situations where you can experience trauma in utero. What I mean by that is if your mother, while carrying you, if she was experiencing her own trauma, then that also structures how your DNA processes information, because while you're in your mother's womb, she's constantly sending signals to you about that environment. So if she's stressed or she's depressed or if she's going through her own traumatic experiences, in essence, you can somewhat be hardwired or predisposed for that trauma. So then if you fast forward to experiencing trauma, once you're outside of the womb, it affects how your brain is structured. Trauma affects your central nervous system. If you think about your central nervous system, it is like the motor of your body. Everything is connected to your central nervous system. So let's look at how trauma maybe affects the brain and how this may make sense as we kind of talk and move forward. So your brain is comprised of your left brain, which is your logical brain, and then you have your right brain, which is your emotional brain. Well, when you are experiencing trauma, that is housed in your right brain. That's your emotion. That's where fight or flight is. That's where those big emotions are. And so people that tend to be always emotional or hyper emotional, at the root of that probably is some sort of trauma. Those people that constantly
wait, Coach Holly, you're taking us too fast. Come on now. I know you do this for a living, but I gotta help my viewers out.
Okay.
I mean, you dropping major nuggets, and that was good. So people who tend to be, you said highly emotional, and what else did you say?
hyper emotional. Like they have
Hyper
big.
emotional. Yes. Can you camp out there just a little bit? Because I think that would help us.
So a person that is hyper emotional, you would think that they have extreme reactions to something that may be minor. For example, it can be something very simple, but they fly off the handle. They have anger issues, or it could be that they're very withdrawn and they could be isolating. That also too could be at the root of trauma because of how they're processing those big emotions. They feel them differently. And because the brain has been restructured, the way that they process, the way that they perceive those interactions, it's kind of skewed. It's almost like the lenses are dirty. Trauma affects our ability to see things clearly. It affects our ability to recall things clearly, and it affects our ability to process things clearly.
Wow.
So if you put those factors in combination with the person that has experienced trauma in any capacity, their reactions, they don't make sense. Like, why are you always this? Or why are you always that? The way that they respond in most cases is rooted in trauma. Because when we've experienced trauma, the way that we respond to those emotions is out of self-preservation. So either I'm going to fight, whether it be physically or against you in some capacity, or I'm going to flight. I'm going to try to evade, avoid, or remove myself from that situation. But again, it's based off of how I perceive that emotion and how I perceive that emotion as even a threat to my own safety. Doesn't matter whether it's realistic or not. Trauma is in the right brain. There is no logic. There is no reason. There is no that makes sense in the right brain. That's over in the left brain where our logic is. Well, because my central nervous system is now hyperactivated, the way that I respond is not going to be the way that you would expect me to, because you have triggered me. And we'll talk a little bit about those triggers.
Woo! I'm telling you, this is just, okay. We said we were going to flow tonight, right?
Yeah.
So I'm in the process, y'all, of reading this book by David Muro. And it's called What Your Husband Isn't Telling You. All right, y'all. And so in this book, David Muro, hopefully I'm saying his name right, he talked about how even the structure of a man's brain is not only larger than ours, right? If I'm understanding that correctly, but also the way the way trauma affects them, it affects them differently than even how trauma affects us as females, right? And so what I was reading was in a male's brain, when they are affected by trauma, it's stored in the amygdala. And the amygdala for a male brain, it gets larger and they can recall traumatic events with a much heightened clarity and sensitivity than we can. And it triggers their fight or flight because that area has now become enlarged due to the trauma. Can you tell I've been reading? Coach Holly?
That's good.
So I said, well, that will explain why one day in prayer, Coach Holly, I never forget, I heard God say to me, he was like, it had to be a form of balance, right? Because men are stronger than us naturally. They're usually bigger, larger, taller. But there's certain areas where he gave them fragility, right? Not to treat them less than, but they are fragile in certain areas, right? And so I was like, wow, God. So it was like, handle them, right? And I said, wow, God, I wish I hadn't known the fragility of them. You know what I mean? You just think the bravado and the ego but that a lot of times that's covering up fragility, right? What we probably would say the inner child, but I'm not going to step on your toes with that. But yeah, can you speak to that brain concept with the male and the female? I know we didn't discuss that in our pre-interview, but I just feel like we're going to flow.
But even if you think about it, so if we think about how we typically raise our boys, I have boys. And if you are a parent of boys, or maybe you are a male that was raised in that alpha society, we teach our little boys, you don't cry. We, in a sense, take their ability to have emotion away from them because by them crying or them being emotional makes them weak. But on the opposite side of that, we teach our little girls that it's okay to be emotional. It's okay to cry. Well, we're actually wired the complete opposite. If you think about it, when a man feels that he's been wronged, or let's just say there's been an incident of infidelity, Men have a much more difficult time forgiving and being able to move forward than women do. Women typically, even though we've been hurt, even though we've been taken advantage of, we continue to show up. We continue to move forward.
Come on now. Come on.
All the things that's expected of us because of how our brain is structured.
Yes.
We have a capacity to be able to deal with trauma than men do.
Wow.
Because of the way the brain is wired. Women, in essence, can handle so much more than a man can. Even if you think about how they act when they're sick, we can be sick, bleeding out the nose, running out the butt. It don't matter. We're going to cook, we're going to clean, we're going to take care of the kids. We're going to take care of our responsibilities. Yeah. Whereas men, because of how they feel that when they're sick, they typically can't do the same things that we do. And that's where sometimes it can be tricky because we have the same expectation. And we can't necessarily have the same expectation because their ability to process is different. Women, we are wonderful at multitasking. You can tell us 10 things to do, we'll remember them, we'll do them. Because our brains are more like waffle cones. We have a lot of different compartments.
Yes.
Men,
yes.
Not so much. They have like maybe 4 compartments. They do this, and then they have to come back. They can do that, then they have to come back. Yes. Now you add trauma in the midst of that, they may have one compartment. They don't even have the ability to handle the things that are coming at them because of how it feels. It activates our threat response system. It affects our central nervous system. So again, you may think it's something minor, but the way that they feel it, because they're hyper emotional, is big.
Very big.
Big emotions. Either they don't have emotion at all or they're really big. There's rarely where you'll find them where they've been able to balance and they're somewhere in between. But it's because of how the brain processes their emotion.
Yeah. No, that was good. I hope I didn't distract you with that. It would have been my next point. I wanted to be able to grab the ball when you lobbed it to me. But that was so good. So I think oftentimes, Coach Holly, we could be thinking, just go flow with me a little bit. I don't know. I won't speak for others. I'll say, I could have been thinking, oh, so-and-so is choosing to not forgive or is choosing to not release this. When now, if I'm hearing you correctly, it's even the way their brain is wired, right? Which makes it now possible through Christ Jesus. I'm not saying even with brains and wiring and all that, you still have to tap into forgiveness. But there is something chemically even going on in the brain as to why it makes it that much more challenging for forgiveness to take root. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes. And a lot with PTSD or anybody that's experienced post-traumatic stress disorder, and that can be any form of trauma, they relive those moments. And so it's almost like whatever has happened to them, it's on autoplay, like it plays over and over and over. Wow. And so those moments, those events are still so very fresh. And that too, why it can be so challenging for them to forgive, because in their mind, they want to be able to forgive, but because our central nervous system, our heart is also connected to our mind. So if I'm replaying it in my mind, I'm re-experiencing that feeling all over again. Wow. So it's hard to me to say that I forgive you when every time I have a thought about it, I also have a feeling that's attached to it. That's why forgiveness can be so difficult. Like I can say I forgive you. Like in my mind, I mean it. But every time I say it or now I think about it, I'm hurt all over again. I'm reliving this all over again. And then it automatically goes back to that fight or flight. And so you may not have done anything to me, but because I had a memory about what you did do to me, it's now attached to a feeling. What you're seeing is my response to that thought, but it's coming out in my feelings. Because
my goodness.
Works.
Woo! Wow, y'all. This is blessing me. This got to be blessing y'all. My God, it's blessing me. And I'm sorry, YouTube. I know I'm not airing on that side, that platform, but when this is done, I promise y'all I will upload it. We're going to make sure we get this content out here. So you mentioned PTSD. So I'm going to just, for those who can't always assume that everybody's a clinician or have a background in social.
I think you're muted. No. No, I can't hear you. Mm-mm. Mm-mm. Hang tight, guys. We're gonna work through these challenges. She'll be right back in. Appreciate your patience.
When I tell you the enemy big man, I'm back, y'all. I'm back.
That's
We're gonna get it out, devil. You a
how it's
whole lie.
gonna roll.
So a call came in and it just knew. So I probably should
Oh,
have put my phone on do not disturb if I would have known we were going to be using our phones, but that's all right. Lord, don't let nobody else call me, Jesus. All right. Yes. And so, what was I saying, Coach Howard? Post-traumatic stress disorder is what you had brought up. So I don't want to assume that everyone knows these acronyms and things like that. But PTSD, the P, post, T, traumatic, S, stress disorder. People know that, but I never want to assume. So what it is defined as is an anxiety disorder that develops in reaction to physical injury or severe emotional or mental distress.
mm-hmm.
So everybody often thinks, I know for me, y'all, I thought, well, that's the people that went to battle, the people that went to war, if you weren't in the four branches, you know what I mean? Marines and Air Force, the Navy, and come on now, y'all. But then, even in our retreat, learning that it still could be considered PTSD for folks that have dealt with infidelity or divorce or even the death of a child or, some type of traumatic event could still be considered post-traumatic stress disorder, correct? Could you expound on that for us,
Yeah.
Coach Holly?
So that's one of the things that I think a lot of people don't consider is that when they hear the term PTSD, they automatically think, well, I didn't serve in the military. I don't have PTSD. Well, in fact, you could, depending on what sort of traumatic experience that you have gone through.
Right.
The tricky thing about PTSD is that many times symptoms will manifest, like the anxiety, sleep disturbances, nightmares. We call it hypervigilance, where you're constantly looking around, easily startled. And they have the symptoms, but not knowing what it is, when in actuality it's PTSD. You also can suffer from secondary PTSD, which means that if you are with somebody who does have PTSD, whether it be from the military or whether it be from their own traumatic experiences, because of you going through the emotional upheaval, because of you possibly even going through the physical upheaval that comes from living with or dealing with a person that does suffer from PTSD, although you may not have gone through the traumatic experiences, your trauma is them being traumatized. So now you suffer from PTSD, but the only difference is theirs is primary, where they were in direct contact with the traumatic experience. Yours is secondary because you're now dealing with the person that has experienced the trauma.
Wow. We didn't learn that, y'all, during the leadership retreat. So I'm over here getting this fresh manna from heaven right there from y'all, right? I'm with y'all. So this is great. All right. So I'm thinking about what would it be called then, Coach Holly, for someone who, let's say they were in a house lived in a home with someone, that person was suffering from, let's say, a parent, okay? And it was a child. And that father was suffering, or that mother was suffering from some type of PTSD. And then that child inadvertently had to grow up seeing how that parent responded to situations and circumstances. Do they then carry that, the child, as they grow up into adulthood? And they then end up, it seems like the patterns that I've studied, end up marrying almost someone who had some of those same similar traits that they watched growing up, because to them that was normal. What they grew up. Could you speak a little bit to that?
Yes, so childhood trauma is maybe more so what you are speaking to. So children that experience trauma as a result of maybe their own trauma, they were physically abused, sexually abused, maybe they were neglected, or they could have grown up in a household that was semi-stable, but maybe the parent suffered from PTSD or the parent had mental health issues. So the child, they develop secondary PTSD, and they also can develop trauma within their own right if it was a primary source of trauma. Well, what happens when that child is traumatized, regardless of whether it was through a parent, regardless of whether it was, through their close relationships, trauma in essence is trauma. It affects that child. And so as we grow, we would expect that we grow into mature, we grow into adults that have the ability to process our emotions. Well, if that child is traumatized, that inner child is now wounded. So as they grow into adulthood, that inner child doesn't grow into adulthood with them. It's oftentimes called arrested development.
Yes.
There's a psychologist back in the 1970s named Erik Erikson. And he had these 8 stages of psychological development. And he said, depending on what stage that trauma or that woundedness takes place, and the deficits that adult individual will now suffer with. So, for example, if I'm wounded in early childhood and maybe my parents neglected me, they weren't there, I didn't have a stable environment, I now grow up to be an adult that has difficulty with trusting others, because I didn't develop the trusting factor that I needed to. So that carries me through life. So here I am, an adult on the outside, but on the inside, I have the emotional IQ of an 8-year-old. That's why in many cases, you think that people are acting immature or they're being childish. In fact, they are, because that inner child is what's ruling them. Yes. When a child is traumatized or wounded as a child, they develop like a persona or an alter ego called the adaptive child. So the adaptive child is like the big brother, big sister. Their job is to now protect this wounded child. So the inner child was wounded. So now the big brother, big sister complex comes on board and says, you know what? I'm going to protect me. So these two grow with this adult, right? And so anytime that adult now feels threatened, why are you so defensive? It's because you have now touched my inner wounded child. My adaptive child has risen up to protect me, and now I'm because I'm not healed. Unhealed areas show up as woundedness. Unhealed areas show up as defensiveness. But it goes back to whatever that person may have experienced as a child that they never dealt with. So you can't understand why this adult is defensive. You can't understand why this adult doesn't trust people. You don't understand why this adult is always sabotaging relationships. Wow. When in fact, it's the adaptive child that is now trying to protect them, because
that is so good
as a child. Yes. And that inner child is still there. But you're not going to hurt my inner child. So you're in battle with the mindset of an 8-year-old or a 4-year-old or whatever age they were when this trauma took place. Then if they've experienced trauma at different levels, then you see all of that. And what happens is that wounded child, like you pointed out, takes that into relationship with another individual that's wounded. Yes. They trauma bond, which we're going to talk about probably on a different live. Oh, you got trauma? Oh, me too. I got trauma. We're going to be great together. And all they do is re-injure the inner child. But they look for those people because it's easier for me to be accepted by somebody who's already damaged and don't know their worth.
Come on. Wait. Come on. Drop that gem again. Come on, Coach Holly. You got to drop that. It's easier for what? Say it again.
It's easy. So if I'm already damaged, I'm not going to go after somebody who's whole and knows who they are. So I go after somebody who's just as damaged as I am. Because if you're just a little bit more damaged than I am, maybe you won't really see how damaged I am. Maybe you really won't see how broken I am. And if I find somebody who's a little bit more damaged than I am, I can fix them. I have the opportunity and the ability to do something different. I can help them. because nobody helped me. So instead of me being able to look at that person and say, no, they're probably not good for me, now I see them as a project. I want to give to them what wasn't given to me, but how do I give something that I don't have to give? Because my inner child is still wounded. I'm empty. I'm pouring from an empty cup. And they just damage themselves because we have unrealistic expectations. I expect you to show up and heal me. We know that God is the only one that can heal us, but we enter into these relationships because we have these wounds, these gaping wounds that we hide from the world, but those that get close to us are able to see, you know what, there's something there. And so I enter into these unhealthy situationships as a means to fill my emptiness, my woundedness. But in fact, it only wounds me even more. So now once I get to the place, I am wounded on top of wounded on top of wounded, but yet you expect me to carry myself as if everything is good. It's not.
Come on.
It's
do y'all see the anointing? Y'all see the anointing coming out of Coach Holly?
The work.
Yes, Jesus. I know if anybody's like me, we sitting on the edge of our seat. How do we get free, Coach? How do we get that? Y'all, we just laying the foundation right now. We already know this is gonna be a collaboration. It's gonna be laying the foundation. So y'all take it slow. Go ahead, Coach. I didn't want to cut you off, but I know people like on the edge of their seat.
That's really, really good. But I think that's important to know, why it's so important to do the inner healing. It's never too late. Many people feel that, well, I've held this all my life. I've carried this all my life. And they're doing themselves a disservice, because I can imagine that you are God who created you to be dealing with all of that, right? You have to be willing sometimes to go back and address the things that you never addressed, because one or two things are going to happen. Either we're going to be a fraction of the person God created us to be, or we'll continue the cycles, because out of our woundedness and out of our emotions is where we make decisions. And so if my perspective is already tainted because I'm looking through the lens of trauma, because I'm looking through the lens of hurt, because I'm looking through the lens of failed expectations of people that I thought were going to be there for me and they didn't, how do I now make good decisions if I don't know how to do that myself, if it was never shown to me?
Yes.
Right? And sometimes we have to make that hard decision to be the one that is the redeemer. Like, we have to be the Kingsman redeemer. We have to be the one that decides no more. I am going to break the generational curses that have been attached to my bloodline, because trauma is a generational curse. Most people that have experienced any form of trauma, especially if it's physical abuse, sexual abuse, neglect, you can look down your family lineage and you can see that you weren't the first person. But we keep secrets. What goes on in this house stays in this house. And so because now we've adapted that mantra, we remain bound even further because we know what Granddaddy did to us. But because I got to respect him, you want to now take your own children around him. Like, when are we going to decide that your trauma, I don't have to be a victim. I don't have to recreate this. But trauma lies. Trauma is a whole lie. And it would make you think what's normal, like that's not normal. Yeah. But because it's seen and nobody has ever called you out on it, or you've not opened up and expressed this to anybody, we stay bound with that trauma. We stay bound trying to protect others and trying to keep secrets. But that inner child within us cries out.
Yeah.
You gotta pay attention. It's crying. And if you don't want to get healed for you, get healed for your children. Get healed for those that are coming behind you. Because your healing, your deliverance, it's bigger than just you.
Amen.
It is so much bigger than just you.
Woo.
We got to be willing to do the work to be healed.
Absolutely. I agree.
Because our force is to be whole.
Yes. So for some who, again, I said there, when I looked this up, y'all did a little bit of research. There are, and I had talked to Coach Holly prior to, and I said, I found 17. She was like, it's even more than that. But the 17 that I found, y'all, so for those who, and I have a little hand mirror over there, y'all, I want to grab it so bad. But it's like many times we can always see what we say, y'all, all the one finger pointing at somebody else when we got 4 other fingers pointing back at us. So sometimes we got to have that mirror in front of us to be like, oh, I can see that when somebody, well, you, me, her, she might be dealing with some PTSD our own self. So I looked up, again, I came up, I saw 17, but it was only 7 that I'm going to highlight on tonight. So if you find, or someone that, you know, in your sphere of influence is having intrusive thoughts, nightmares, they're avoiding reminders of the event that took place. I don't want to talk about that. I don't want, they want to just shut that off as if it never happened. Mm-hmm. We cannot conquer what we're not willing to confront.
Oh, that's good.
Period. Yeah. That's just facts, right? Or memory loss. Mm-hmm. People was like, oh, I don't remember that. Or, oh, and I'm like, you younger than me. You in your late 30s and you don't remember stuff like that. These are things, y'all, that we got to kind of, if you're seeing certain little signs, if people are saying they can't remember things, let's just be mindful.
So let me piggyback off of that real quick.
Sure, yeah.
So a couple of things happen in regards to our memory as it relates to trauma. Yeah. Many times we can experience a traumatic event and literally have no recollection of what happened. Like somebody tell you what happened. Mm-hmm. Well, the brain is amazing. It's an amazing organ. It does what it does really, really well. Yeah. Well, the job too is self-preservation. So whenever the brain is experiencing something that is like overloading it, it almost is like it shuts down. Yeah. Coach Key, and I'm going to give her credit for this example because I thought it was so profound. She described the brain as like a breaker box. And if you know anything about a breaker box, it's supposed to allow electricity to flow through. Well, if you overpower that electrical box, what happens? The lights go out, right? The power is out. It blows a fuse. Well, it's the same thing with trauma. When someone is experiencing a traumatic experience, when they're in it, the brain, like it's too much. And the way that we are wired is different. What traumatizes you may not traumatize me. Right. That's why even in the military, you have guys and girls who have served in the exact same location, in the exact same battle, but their experience of trauma is totally different. You may have one that comes home and they're fine. The other, they got serious issues. And so it's the same for us. The way that we process trauma is different. So that's one thing that can happen. Like, I really don't have a memory of it. Well, let's just say you have a person that has experienced a traumatic event. They're an adult. They have maybe diagnosed PTSD. Well, when you have PTSD, it also affects the way that our brain is wired. So if you can think about the brain as that breaker box, and let's just say on that breaker box, PTSD, whenever these events happen, it creates these slits in the wiring. So in most wires, there's like a plastic or this protective coating, like a conduit, so that way if you can't touch the wires, right? But if that plastic coating is now exposed and you touch that wire, you can get shocked, right? Yeah. So the brain that way. So a person that has PTSD, they now have these slits on the wiring when it relates to their brain. And so you don't know where the slits are. And so you may be talking to them about something, but maybe you're talking to them where there is a slit. Maybe they're in the middle of an episode. Maybe you don't realize that they're being triggered because they're not showing it outwardly. Well, you may be talking to them, but you're talking to a slit. Like, there is no connection, right? It's a dead zone. Wow. If you think about on, like, if the phone's on, but I'm in a dead spot. Oh my God, that breaches. You in a dead spot with this individual. Yes. And so you say what you need to say, or whatever the case may be. You go on about your day, you come back, and they're like, I don't remember that. And you like, you were there. And yes. You big mad because you know.
Yes. Yes.
You know
that's that tickling you.
And they obviously, they don't remember because you got them when they were in a dead zone. You can't get calls when you're in a dead spot. Your text messages don't come through when you're in a dead spot. Like, your phone is on, but there's nobody home. And so that's how it affects our memory. Or their recollection of what happened is skewed because of how trauma affects the brain. So they may be there, but the way that they recall the event is totally different than how you recall. And then if that's occurring in relationships, now you're bumping heads because you're telling them, no, this is what happened. And they're like, no, that's not what happened. And you think that they're like, okay, you trying to play with me. They perceived it differently because while the event was occurring, the way that they processed it was different.
Yeah.
So that's why they recall and you recall is totally different, because you're dealing with a person whose hardwiring of their brain is garbled up. It's not the way that it should be.
That's so good. It almost makes me think about too of when you have multiple personalities, where it's like it's the mechanism for our brain to almost another personality will come on board, almost like that adaptive child coming in as a form of protection, right?
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah, it's like, I can't handle this, so I need to recreate another. Ooh, Coach Holly, I'm thinking about even in some of my own personal situations where I literally, you could see a person have a Dr. Jekyll persona and a Mr. Hyde, and you're like, which one is here today? You know what I mean? And it's basically off of the trauma that they've experienced, depending on who's showing up that day.
Yes. And because of that, we were talking a little bit earlier about how the brain is structured when it comes to trauma. And we talked about the front brain, which is our left brain. And then we talked about the amygdala, our right brain. Well, as long as I am logical, this is like would be our hand model of the brain. My right brain is protected by my left brain. All of this is connected to our spine. This would be our heart, and on down is our gut. You have more receptors in your gut than you do in any other part of your body. That's why you can, when you get nervous, you feel it in your gut. Sometimes you may have a gut feeling about something. When you're anxious, you may have a little bubble gut, you may get nauseous, but there's neuroreceptors that picks up on the environment.
Wait a minute, Coach. I tell you, you're taking us too fast. So you're actually saying, because I know oftentimes you used to say, I had a gut feeling, or just something didn't feel right in our gut. That really is.
You have neuroreceptors that are like feelers that can feel the. And so when knowing that, all of this works well together. But a person that has trauma, their threat response system is hyperactivated. It's almost like they have SWAT team on standby. Where for us, we're just going about life, do. Their SWAT team is always on standby. And the way that looks, when somebody has experienced trauma, their baseline has been reestablished. So if this is my normal baseline where I'm able to handle my emotions, I'm able to process, I'm able to manage my anger, like this would be my baseline. But if I've experienced trauma, the baseline has moved up. So I don't have the same ability that I did here, my threshold. I don't have the same capacity. That shows up more when you have an adult that has experienced some form of trauma. The baseline is moved up. Well, if I'm doing everything like I should, my right brain is protected. I'm logical. You can talk to me. I have reason. And side note, when people are making decisions or doing things that just don't make sense, it's like they don't even logically make sense, because they're not logical. For whatever reason, their left brain has now become disengaged. They're all in their right brain. There is no logic. There's no reason. There is no language. It's all emotion. The amygdala is also where our fight or flight or our threat response system is activated. So the moment that I feel triggered, you said something I didn't like, boom, I flip my lid. That's that Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde personality. Because as long as my left brain is on board, I'm logical. I can talk to you. I got a little bit of sense. But the moment that I feel threatened, it doesn't matter whether you did anything to threaten me or not. It's my perception of what may be a threat. I flip my lid. So now my inner wounded child is exposed. The adaptive child rises up, and you got Mr. Hyde. You got a whole different persona, because their goal is to protect whatever that looks like. But it's because that left brain is no longer engaged, and I'm over in my right brain, which is where multiple personalities lie, which is where that adaptive child is, because it is an emotional response. It's not going to make sense, and you can't reason with it. You're trying to get them to make sense, you repeating yourself, you rephrasing what you said, you going on, they're not there. You are in a dead zone. When a person has flipped their lid, there is nobody home. And it doesn't matter that you see this emotional response. It's the right brain. It's the adaptive child. It is these multiple personas that have now showed up on the scene, and that person is no longer at home.
Wow. So if I'm hearing you correctly, it probably wouldn't even be wise to have certain conversations once you see elevation has taken place and a person is now coming a bit undone, if we just table it. And so both parties can operate in our right and our left brain, because just being in our left, we're not going to get much accomplished at all.
You're not get much accomplished, but I know sometimes that can be challenging, because if they are still very reactive to a particular topic, when is the good time to have that conversation? When is the right time to have that? And so in those cases, it may be that you get a mediator. Sometimes people become less often if there's like a mediator present, whether it's couple counseling or whether it's somebody that you both trust and respect, can help mediate the conversation. Because it can help the left brain back on board. Because if you are now the trigger, it doesn't matter how you say it, how cute you say it, the fact that you said it is going to set them off. So it may be that you go get a mediator who can interpret what you're trying to say, but can also establish a calmness and also can establish a different threshold in the room, so that way you can be heard. And then two, knowing communication styles. And we'll talk about that a little bit later, but really quickly, you have to know what type of communicator you are. Are you the type of communicator that as soon as something happens, you want to talk about it? I'm like that. Like, I want to address it. Like, I don't want it on. I want to address it. Well, if your partner or whoever you're having this conversation with, maybe they need to process. And men especially, they, in most cases, they need a little bit of time to process. They don't process as fast as we do. We process quick. We're coming up with a response as quick as we're talking. For them, they may hear you, but they may need time to, let's table it. Can we come back and talk about this later? But in regards to having those tough conversations, there also has to be rules around, the Bible says, don't go to bed mad. Like, don't let the sun set on your anger. So if there's something that needs to be addressed, hey, we need to have this conversation before 11:59 p.m. Not carrying this over into the next day. But I think be difficult if no matter how you say it, it triggers them. So now you have all of these unresolved issues in the relationship, because no matter what you do, you've triggered them. And now you're triggered because now you become resentful. Now you become feeling some type of way because you have all of these things that have not been addressed. And so it becomes this tit for tat, and we're bumping heads because there's a huge elephant in the room that nobody's willing to address. But it's because of we've allowed it to grow to the size of an elephant, and there's no way or understanding of where do we even start, because we both in essence have made a mess of this.
Yes. Wow. Woo! I know that time is spent.
We started late.
We started about 7:38-ish, y'all. So y'all bear with us, but we really are kind of wrapping up. We hit I did tell you I was going to give y'all 7. It was 4 that I got to. The memory loss. Number 5, it said negative thoughts about self and the world. So that's their perception. Self-isolation, feeling distant, wanting to isolate themselves. And Coach Holly even spoke to that. And then anger and irritability, which we did touch on that, to that Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde type persona. So those were just 7 highlighted things. If you see that in self, or if you see it in somebody else, they may be experiencing post-traumatic stress disorder. All right. And I know people are like, oh, don't speak that over me. Don't put, you know what I mean? I tell people all the time, sometimes you may need to use a little therapy and Jesus. You might have to take some medicine and Jesus. And it all works together until it comes to a point where it's like, okay, you can put one of those down and you always keep Jesus. So I don't believe that we have to throw out the baby and the bathwater, so we got to know when to, eat the chicken and spit out the bones, or eat the meat, spit out the bones. Y'all know what I'm trying to say. So let's not be so quick to be like, oh, I don't want to do therapy and I don't want to do this and I don't want to take any medication. Like, do what you need to do for a season, and as God leads, guides, and directs you, and then we just follow the instructions, right?
Therapy doesn't always mean that something is wrong. You know, sometimes
Right.
just talking with somebody gives you a different perspective. But most of the, because we have so many things that we haven't dealt with, at some point we could benefit from being in therapy.
Absolutely.
Like, they embrace it. They got therapists on speed dial. They in therapy.
We're the only one in African American community like, oh, that means I'm crazy. No, it does not. It does not mean that at all. Okay, it means you want to be more whole, healed, and delivered and set free is what I actually think. I love my coaching session. I'm counting down them. All right, is it time for us to meet? Sergeant Vance? Yes, I love them, and I don't miss not a nair coaching session, not a one. All right, so y'all, we're going to give us a brief little time. We're not going to pull on Coach Holly too much. Put a Q before your question, so I know that it is a question and not just a comment. And we'll have Coach Holly ask a couple questions. I'll say maybe give her like 2 or 3, and then we're going to wrap up for this evening. So y'all hurry up, type fast in the chat. If y'all got, put your Q in front of it if you have a question for Coach Holly. Oh, let me put the disclaimer. The disclaimer. Okay, y'all. We are going to be honorable. We are not going to talk about uncovering anyone, especially if we don't have their permission. So let's speak in generalities. If you're speaking about someone else, if you're speaking about yourself, by all means, you can be as specific as you need to be. But if you're talking about or asking a question about someone else, let's just kind of keep it general. We don't want to uncover love covers. All right? All right, y'all. Don't y'all be afraid to ask y'all questions. Y'all better take this opportunity while you can. I told y'all, hey, y'all pen and paper ready. Be ready for your questions.
You got
your
paper, everything on the outline?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
You touched on them. Yep. And I know we'll go into more details with other lives that we'll have. Yep. But we sure did. That was really good. Y'all have any questions? I'm gonna go ahead and wrap up. I know for me, oh, love it. Dr. C said, how can we get more of this? Yes.
So we have a couple things planned, but also I love, like, well, I don't say I love, God is making me love doing live videos. But I have a YouTube, and it's The Multifaceted Soul. So you can follow me on YouTube, and I have videos that go a little bit more in depth about healing the inner child. There's quite a few videos that you can go on there and watch. And I will also, I don't know how to do it here. Can I do it here? Oh, I can do it here. Y'all can't tell me nothing. I'm gonna put it in the chat.
Hey, look at you.
Go to my YouTube. Yes. And then I have a Facebook page that's The Multifaceted Soul. Instagram, it's all The Multifaceted Soul. And so on all the platforms, I do reels occasionally, just talking about this stuff. But also, if there's other things that maybe we don't cover throughout our engagement, then definitely reach out to me. Let me know. I'll do a video about anything.
Yes.
What information might be helpful for you. And I know that some of this information may be the first time you've heard this stuff. Right. So I know it's a lot. That's why we try to keep it short to not overwhelm, because it's a lot of processing. But I think this is something that is needed just to help make sense of the things that we're seeing in the natural. So the dot spiritually.
All right. Amen. Looks like that must have been our only question. So, Charlie, I can't believe it. Huh?
No, I was just saying, any more questions?
Oh, does anybody speak now or forever hold your peace? People probably like they're afraid they're going to answer.
Ask a question. I was saying, don't be waiting till we done and come to the
inbox. Or be all up in my messenger inbox. I'm going to say, no, you had an opportunity.
There's no silly question. Any question you want to ask, you can definitely ask. No judgment. If I can provide guidance in any capacity, that's what this is for. But y'all got about 3 more minutes to ask.
If that, before we, I know I will say, Coach Holly, what gave me the biggest aha moment during leadership training was not only the restructuring of the brain, but also the trauma bonding. That really just spoke volumes to me. Could you touch on that just a little bit? I know you did tonight, but just I guess give us a little bit more of understanding of either helping us identify, is that something that we ourselves may have tapped into, or whether if we know someone who entered into that, maybe how we could help them unwrap the layers, uncover the layers. I don't know if I'm wording it correctly. Do you know where I'm trying to go with that? Because sometimes you may not even realize that you trauma bonded.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
So there are two types of trauma bonding. Trauma bonds can occur where, like I said in my earlier example, maybe you were an individual that experienced childhood trauma. And so then you get in a relationship, or maybe it can be friendship. You get in relationship, whether it's an intimate relationship or a friendship with another individual who also has experienced maybe childhood trauma. Or maybe as an adult, you experience domestic violence. And so now you connect with another individual who has experienced domestic violence. And so there's a bonding that takes place over that trauma in the sense that you get it, you understand. It's more pronounced in intimate relationships, especially if it was childhood trauma, because there's something about them that you feel they get it. Like, I don't have to explain to them what being physically abused is like. And so they feel a sense of comfort with that person because I don't have to explain what this means. The other type of trauma bonding, which I think we often see as well in adult relationships, is if, let's just say, as an adult, we enter into a relationship, whether it be friendship or intimate, and while together, we experience a trauma. So let's just say while in a marriage, like maybe a parent died, and that was traumatic for one of the individuals. Well, because that person was there for you, that person, helped you through that trauma, you can now feel a sense of obligation to that person because you were with me at my lowest. Yeah. And so now you've bonded over the trauma when actuality, there was never love there. And even times when a person has now been healed, ooh, this is good. That can be the tricky part about trauma bonding. If one person decides to go on a journey to be healed, they no longer have anything in common because I'm healed. I know who I am. I no longer need you to fill this void. I'm no longer wounded. So I don't need you to put band-aids on this wound that now exists within me. And so that can create complications in the relationship when one person goes forth to try to get their healing. But if they both stay broken, then it's not even love that brought them together. It was the fact that they both experienced trauma. And thought was love was actually oxytocin being released because it feels the same way. Oxytocin is the emotion or the chemical that's released when we feel good. Oxytocin is also the same response in our brain when we get high.
Come on.
And it becomes addictive. And I'll just add this to it. Once a person has bonded over trauma and they have this push and pull in regards to oxytocin, now they're being love bombed, which is a lot of the things what narcissists do. They love you heavy on the front end, and a narcissist can be male or female. Yes. Think about the Jezebel spirit. That can be male or female. So they love you heavy on the front end. Oh my God, I cannot believe that you're with me. I can't live my life without you. So they let your guard down, they make their way in, but the moment that you do something they don't like or something doesn't go their way, they now withdraw their love from you. So that's why it's called a love bomb, because I love you and then I drop the bomb on you, baby. Right? And that too creates this oxytocin. And so that's why people that find themselves in domestic violence situations, like, why you just won't get out? Why? It's an addiction because they love them so heavy on the front end and it makes them feel good. Oxytocin is like a drug. There are pills called Oxy that people take because it's the love drug. It makes them feel good. So this feels really, really good. I know I'm going to be abused later. I know you're going to put me down later, but they get addicted to the makeup. Come on, adults, makeup sex. Why do you think that's a thing? Because of the oxytocin, because of the hormones that are released during the makeup. But being connected to somebody through trauma looks like, not only do they have a trauma bond, but then they become love bombed by that other person as a means to keep them held captive.
I love that. I love that because I'm even thinking of instances where I know people have tried to let go, have tried to walk away, and that person just won't let them go. And they're saying, "Oh, even when I tried to go, it still didn't feel right." Well, it's not going to feel right if you're trying to just stay in your feelings and your emotions. But is it logically? Is it right for you to be in this situation? Does it? You know what I mean? Do you think that this is healthy for you? You know, so it's interesting. But I did get a question, and I meant to ask. I meant to state this in the beginning as well, that if you didn't feel comfortable putting your question in the chat, that you could message me offline. So someone did that, so they took care of that. So this is an anonymous question. How can someone, we're not going to have no calls, mess up this live. How can someone be prepared? Can y'all still hear me?
Mm-hmm.
How can someone be prepared and knowledgeable in responding to someone else when their inner child arises? Did that make sense?
So if I'm, and then let me know if they say yes, because I'm going to repeat. So I'm an individual and I'm dealing with a person who, for whatever reason, maybe I've triggered them and their inner child now shows up.
Yes.
How am I now able to deal with that inner child when they show up?
Yes. I see the bubble going, but so far I think they answered it right. I think the question right.
That's the question.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So it's going to take a couple of things because you don't have the ability to heal them. And I think that's where we get frustrated because we are doing all the right things. We're patient, we're listening, we think that we're doing all the things that we should do, but their healing is their responsibility. It is not responsibility to heal you. Now, if anything, you can pray for them. You can maybe have general conversations about the behavior when it shows up, you know, and sometimes it can be helpful too in those moments, like, what's going on for you right now? Because they may not even realize that they're having this reaction, especially if every time they have a reaction, you react to the reaction. So now it's no longer about their behavior, but now it's about how you responded to the way that they're behaving. So if you're able to stay calm in that moment, and if you're able to stay mentally in your left brain, just asking them, hey, can you help me understand what's going on for you right now? You seem upset or you seem angry. You know, did I say something? But if you can take the time to pause and bring attention to what you're seeing in a constructive way, because you can say, I don't know why every time we have a conversation, you get mad. That's
not going to be productive, right? Or if you say it in a patronizing way too, that's going to make somebody feel like, oh, you trying to patronize me? You trying to disrespect me? You know, so you really got to even be careful of how you word the question.
How you word it, because communication is not only what's said, but it's what's heard. So you may have the best intention of why you always act like that. Like you won't understand it, but what they heard may be something totally different. So being able to bring awareness to what you're seeing, and if you know that they're a type of individual, once they're activated, like they're no longer in their left brain, the least amount of words is possible. And so it may be that you have to wait till they come back down, and they may not be fully left brain, but if they're here, you just gonna have to wait. And that can be hard for us to want to wait to be able to address the behaviors. But the moment that you feel that they've calmed down and they're more logical, you can maybe have that conversation. Hey, what just happened? Like, I'm apologize, even though you probably may not have done anything. I am sorry if I said something that upset you. Can we talk about it? Because I would like to take responsibility for my own behavior. You got to think, how would you have that conversation with the 5-year-old who went in the kitchen and broke all your dishes? Are you going to have a logical conversation with that 5-year-old about it? No. You know, once you calm down, you know, you're going to explain to them, you know, the next time you need help in the kitchen, ask mommy, or however you would word it. But you got to think about, you're having a conversation not with that 40-year-old person that's in front of you, but you're having a conversation with that inner child, because that's the one that's acting out. But the other piece that you have to ask yourself, why are they reacting that way? And sometimes it could be, do they not feel safe? And that means we have to take a look at ourselves, because why is the adaptive child rising up? Why do they get defensive every time there's a conversation? And if there's a history of no matter what they say, it's not good enough, it's going to be difficult for you to show them that I'm working on my behavior. And sometimes that's accountability. Sometimes that's acknowledging, you know what, I haven't always said things right. I'm working on the way that I speak to you. I'm working on being able to communicate, but you may have to make that first step, which may not seem fair because they're the one that's acting out. They're a 5-year-old. You don't expect the 5-year-old to come and apologize to you for breaking your stuff. No, you tell them the expectations, and you may have to apologize. And that's the way that you build that trust. That's the way that you show them that I'm making improvements. But again, I mean, basically, just to answer your question, I think it's going to be a matter of where they are when they have those moments, and you figuring out the best way to circle back around and just ask them, hey, what happened? Because they may not have any awareness. Like, they may check out. So they may not have any awareness that they're even responding to you in that manner. And then especially if you react, it's about how you responded. And then their behavior, what initiated all of this, is no longer up for discussion because you shouldn't have said that, or you shouldn't have did this. So remain blameless. Remain blameless. Yeah, remain blameless.
Woo. Yeah, I got Coach Holly got to grab a napkin. Yeah. I know we've been ready to wrap up.
I don't get the shade off.
That's right.
But that's all right. I'm here for it.
And this will be the last one. I'm just going to expound upon that one. I'm thinking sometimes I know I keep it on myself. I won't even deflect it on anybody else. But I know even often at times if somebody may say, well, how are you feeling? Or, you know, what's wrong? And sometimes you don't always have the verbiage, right? So I can see me asking someone and they're like, it's really something, but they don't have the words to be able to explain what it is that. So then what do you do in that instance? When it's like, I know I'm feeling some kind of way. I don't have the verbiage to explain to you that I'm feeling some kind of way, but I know I'm feeling some kind of way.
One of the things that I think you shouldn't do is try to name their emotion. So you may see them and they may appear angry. Why are you mad? You just, when in actuality, they're hurt. And then sometimes when they have a bigger response, it's because you've misnamed that emotion. And because they don't necessarily have the words to explain to you what they're feeling, they know it's not that. So try to name their emotions for them, because that may not be what they're experiencing, even though on the outside it looks like anger, but on the inside, at the root of that is hurt. So when somebody is having these emotions and maybe you don't know what the emotion is, just giving them space to talk about without even necessarily trying to name the emotion, because naming the emotion isn't necessarily going to change how they feel, but it may be helpful to identify the behaviors that I see. You know, when we started talking, I noticed your voice elevated. Do you want to talk about that? You know, I noticed, you know, when we were talking, you know, you got up and you left the room, which is a flight response. You know, and then once you have an awareness of maybe what the triggers are, then I think you'll be able to better identify their reactions. But like I said, don't try to make them name what it is they're experiencing, because they don't know. But speak to the behavior that you're seeing. You know, you got quiet. Is everything okay? Instead of, oh, you must be mad.
Right. You shut down.
You shut down.
That's going to make somebody defensive.
And
right.
That could be somebody's button.
Yeah.
You shut down. And they may have, but just saying, oh man, you got really quiet. What's going on? You know, or do you want to talk about it? But addressing the behavior that you see instead of trying to name it and attach it to any.
Oh, I love that, Coach. Even maybe our another live, I want us to talk about words that we could say in place of "you mad" or "why you mad," or like you said, are you shutting down? Like another word to replace. You said, "I noticed you got quiet." You know, I noticed that your voice elevated. Like I love that you gave us words to replace what would be an initial response was, you know, what's wrong? Are you shutting down?
Here's what we do when somebody get quiet. I know you hear me talking to you. I know you hear me talking.
Yes. Yeah. So maybe we can. That's not going to help at all. So I would love for us to even give some suggestions on some words that we could say in replace of saying angry or you shut down. So that would, getting more content, y'all. Getting more content. All right, y'all. So it has truly been an hour now at this point, y'all. Y'all know I don't tend to have y'all on this long. I do appreciate everyone hanging with us. I know y'all have to admit, y'all see why the devil was mad with this technology, y'all, because he didn't want y'all to hear this information, but we got it out. We pressed and we got through it. So on Tuesday, April the 11th, y'all, we will be coming live again. Trust me, I'm going to have all this StreamYard and technical difficulties worked out by then. And we will be bringing you part 2. And the title of that will be When Love Hurts.
Ooh, that was good, y'all.
Somebody we're going to fire in the chat.
Relationship. So
say it again, Coach Charlie. Say it again.
Right tonight. I'm going to need y'all to come with your questions. Don't inbox. We done gave you 15 extra minutes to ask a question.
2 questions on tonight. So I know they're going to be trying to be ninjas in the chat, in the inboxing, trying to
It's such a phenomenal job. They're just processing it. So process it. April 11th, come with your question.
Don't inbox Coach Holly. Don't y'all dare. Don't y'all pull on my guests. Don't do it. Don't you do it. Don't you do it. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for hanging with us, Coach Holly. Please save this video because I'm going to need to upload it onto my platform as well. So it'll ask you like how many days to save it or whatever. So just make sure you don't let it delete because I need to upload it. But thank you, everyone, for hanging on with us. I love and appreciate y'all for the support. Thank you, Coach Holly, for just allowing the Lord to use you. Woo!
Good. This really good. I enjoyed it. Me
too. I did as well. Yes. So, all right. Good night, everyone.
Guys.